You know that feeling when something that belongs to you suddenly doesn't feel like yours anymore? It's that cold shock in your chest. That's what I felt when I saw the metal gate chained shut, blocking the road I'd driven for 20 years. Road to my family's cabin. My escape. My peace. My legacy. Let me take you back, but not to the start. Let's begin where it stings the most. I was carrying a box of old photo albums. Planning to spend the weekend alone at the lake. My wife had passed the year before. That cabin was our spot. She loved the sound of the frogs at night and the way the pine trees moved when the wind came through. I just wanted one quiet evening. But when I turned the corner onto the gravel road, there it was. A silver chain, a bright yellow lock, and a shiny sign. Private access, HOA permission required. At first, I thought it was a mistake, that someone accidentally put it up. Then I saw the camera freshly mounted to the tree stump by the gate. It blinked red, like an eye watching me. That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was on purpose. You see, this wasn't just any neighborhood HOA. They had grown like a weed. Quiet at first, then all at once. They were in everything. Speed limits, trash can sizes, what color your shutters could be. Then they got bold. They started enforcing rules on properties outside the formal HOA map, including mine. But here's the part they didn't know, and this is where it gets good. They didn't know. I own the only bridge in the only road that leads past the HOA and into the lake area. It crosses a bridge. And I built that bridge. Myself in 2002, on my land, paid for it in full. Poured the concrete with my dad. It's mine. But I didn't tell them that. Not yet. Let me pause here and rewind, not all the way, just to last summer. There was a knock at my door. A woman in a blazer, clipboard in hand, said she was with the Lakeside Preservation Committee, which was just the HOA with a fancy name. She smiled too wide. We're standardizing access, she said. You'll need a new access permit. I told her I'd been using that road since before she probably even lived in the county. She gave me a pamphlet and walked off like she didn't hear a word I said. 3 weeks later, I started improving the gravel road. Dump trucks, signs, cones. Then came the gate. And that stupid camera. So here I was, alone, locked out of my own land. But here's the thing. I didn't yell. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even try to cut the chain. I turned around, drove 2 miles down the other road, the one nobody really used because it's overgrown, and I crossed my bridge. Quiet, strong, and solid like always. And just like that, I was in. The HOA had blocked me from their road, but they had no idea I never needed it. They didn't even check the maps. They didn't know the bridge existed, but I wasn't done. That night I sat on the cabin porch with a beer in one hand and my dad's old map in the other. The original land survey. You know what it showed? Not only did I own the bridge, I owned the land underneath their fancy new gate. That metal post they drilled into the dirt. That camera sitting on my property. Now I could have called the county, I could have sued. I could have ripped the gate down, but I waited, because sometimes silence is louder than shouting. Let's jump forward a few weeks. I watched from my cabin window as a shiny black SUV pulled up to the gate. She got out, the same woman with the clipboard. She looked confused, pulled her phone out, talked to someone. Then she crossed the gate on foot and walked in. Guess where she went? To the lakefront HOA clubhouse. The one built 2 years ago. Guess what she didn't know? That to get there, they had rerouted their main access through my land without permission. Turns out, when they improved the road, they didn't file a single easement. The old route had washed out. They paved across my land without ever checking who owned it. She walked that road like she owned it. She was trespassing the whole time. I didn't stop her. Not yet. Because sometimes the best revenge is just knowing. Later that night I walked the path myself, flashlight in hand, and I found it there. Freshly installed fiber optic cable, buried just 6 inches deep. Running through my property like I didn't exist. They'd spent tens of thousands improving land that wasn't even theirs. Let's go back now, years earlier. My dad warned me. He always said, own the land under your feet, understand the land around it. People forget to check when they build on borrowed ground. He was right. I never planned to use that bridge again. But when they boxed me out, they handed me the key to everything. That's when I started planning. I got the county records, confirmed everything, printed maps, photos, deeds, marked every inch they'd crossed, made a neat little folder. Then I sat down at my old oak desk and wrote a letter. Not angry, not demanding, just factual. I included a copy of my deed, the bridge plans, the land plot showing their gate, their cables, their posts, all sitting neatly on my side of the line. I sent it to the HOA president with a simple note. You've been using my property. I expect that to stop. Or rent starts at $4,000 per day. I didn't hear back for a week. Then I got a call. Young man, nervous voice. Yes, sir. We, received your documentation. I told them I'd be happy to meet. Bring the HOA. Board. Bring their lawyer. Bring coffee. Let's go back once more. Not far this time. Just a few months before the gate went up, I was at the grocery store when I heard them talking. 2 HOA board members chatting about clearing the lake of old structures and modernizing access. They were talking about me, about my cabin, my land, like I was in the way of progress. I guess I was, but they never once talked to me. They just assumed I wouldn't fight back. Now let's come back to the present. They took the gate down last week. No apology, just gone. The camera too. Pulled off the tree like it was never there. But here's the best part. They never even tried to explain because they knew they messed up big. And now, I'm still watching. I've got signs posted, legal notices filed. But more than that, I've got my peace. And that's something they can't buy, block, or steal. You know what's strange? I used to think I was just a guy with a quiet cabin and a long memory. I never saw myself as the kind of person who'd end up in a war with a neighborhood committee. But that's what happens when someone pushes too far without knowing who they're pushing. And in this case, I had no idea they'd started a fight with the one person holding the only way in and out. Let me tell you what happened before they ever locked that gate. Something I didn't mention last time. 3 months earlier, I'd gotten a strange letter in the mail. No return address, just a lakeside HOA letterhead and a seal that looked more like a corporate logo than anything neighborly. It said, "We are reviewing all land parcels that access shared lakefront areas. You may be required to participate in new maintenance fees and traffic use guidelines." I almost laughed. Maintenance fees? On land I owned? On a road I had never agreed was shared in the first place? But what really made me raise my eyebrows was the line near the bottom. Unregistered use may result in access restrictions. See, that's not how you talk to someone when you're trying to work things out. That's how you talk when you think you've already won? That letter stayed pinned to my fridge till the day they put up that chain. You've probably figured it out by now, but this wasn't just about access. This was a power move. A land grab. The HOA didn't want to manage the land. They wanted to control it, and they underestimated the one guy who never needed their approval. But you know what really fired me up? I started talking to some of the other property owners on the lake, people I'd known for years. Most of them were older. Some lived out of state. They'd gotten similar letters. Some had even started paying the fees, just to avoid the hassle. One guy, James, told me they'd rerouted a walking trail through his backyard, said it was better for community flow. Another neighbor, Maria, had her dock declared non-compliant because it didn't match the HOA's aesthetic guidelines. The dock had been there since 1991. They were steamrolling people, just quietly, and most folks didn't even know. They could say no, but I did. I had proof. I had maps, deeds, photos, and I had something they didn't. That bridge. Let me take you back again this time. To the day we built it, it was hot, July. My dad was already in his 60s, but he moved. Like a man half his age. We laid rebar together, poured concrete with wheelbarrows, didn't even hire a crew. Just me, him, and a couple of friends. We didn't build it because we had to. We built it because we wanted a way to the cabin that didn't rely on anyone else's permission. Funny how that choice made all those years ago would end up being my greatest defense. Real quick, if this story's got you shaking your head like it did me, hit that subscribe button right now. I've got more coming, and trust me, it only gets crazier from here. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, drop a comment. I read every single one, and your story might just show up in the next video. On screen, subscribe for the rest of the story, and tell us your worst HOA moment in the comments. Now let me tell you what happened when the HOA finally responded. To my letter, I expected a legal letter, denial, maybe even a cease and desist. But instead, they sent a man, dressed in khakis and a tucked-in polo. He showed up at the cabin unannounced, which, by the way, is also trespassing. I was on the porch, working on some wood trim. He smiled too much. Offered me a coffee from some local bakery. Said his name was Derek. Derek started talking like we were old friends. Told me the HOA wasn't trying to cause issues. They just wanted to make sure everyone contributed fairly. I didn't say a word, just let him talk. Then he said it. We'd be willing to offer you honorary membership in the HOA. No dues, no restrictions. Just access to our amenities and a chance to be part of the community decisions. I looked at him dead serious and asked, "Are you offering me free membership in something I didn't ask to join in exchange for not suing you?" He paused, then tried to pivot. Just want to avoid escalation. I pointed to the map. I had open on the table beside me the one showing where their gate, camera, and cable all crossed onto my land. "You already escalated," I said. "Now I'm deciding how far I want to go." He left shortly after that. A few days later, the gate was gone. Quietly, no letter. Day what they weren't done. Out. Not by a long shot, because a week after the gate came down, they started building something new. This time it was a small community path, a gravel walkway leading from the HOA clubhouse to the lakeshore. Guess where it ran? Right along the edge of my property line. And this time, they were careful. Survey stakes, flags, everything by the book. But they forgot one detail. One 10-foot stretch of the path cut across a sliver of land that technically still belonged to me, from an old property divide that was never corrected in the HOA's map. I didn't say a word. I waited again. I went to the county office, pulled every document, every zoning map, every easement record, and then I hired a surveyor. 3 weeks later, I had everything I needed. I didn't send another letter. Instead, I installed a small wooden fence right across the walking path, with a sign, "Private property, no access." And guess what? That fence exploded the HOA message board. People freaked out. Who put that up? Why is the path blocked? Someone claiming part of our trail? They're asking the wrong questions. The right one was, whose land are we really walking on?
I'll let
me pause here and say something that might surprise you. I don't hate the HOA. I don't even hate the people running it. Most of them probably think they're doing the right thing, but there's a line. When you cross it, when you start taking without asking, that's not management. That's control. And they tried to control the wrong guy because I don't need their bridge. I don't need their road. I sure as hell don't need their permission. All I need is what I've always had. That bridge, that cabin, the truth on paper. You ever watch someone dig their own hole and keep going, even after you toss them a rope? That's what the HOA did next. You think the gate fiasco, the fiber cable, the walking path, all that would have been enough. But no, they doubled down, and this time they brought lawyers. I was at the cabin one morning mid-fall. The leaves were that perfect burnt orange. Everything was quiet except for the crackle of my fireplace and a couple of crows off in the trees. Then I heard tires on gravel, slow, careful. I stepped onto the porch with my coffee, and sure enough, a black sedan pulled up just short of the bridge. 2 people stepped out. A younger woman in heels didn't belong in the woods. An older man holding a manila envelope like it was radioactive. He handed it to me without saying a word, just nodded inside. A cease and desist. They accused me of willful obstruction, of community development, interference with agreed-upon improvements, and get this, hostile behavior toward HOA volunteers. I actually laughed. They were suing me for blocking access to land they had no legal right to touch. I set the papers down on the porch table and poured myself another cup. I didn't call a lawyer right away. Called my neighbor James, he said. You got one too? Turns out they sent out 3 cease and desists that week. To me, to James, and to Maria, the woman with the old dock. Same language, same envelope, same threat. Comply or face legal consequences. I wasn't scared. I was furious. Let's rewind, just for a minute. About 2 years earlier, there was a town hall meeting. Not a big one. Just 20 or 30 of us. It was supposed to be a community potluck, but the HOA turned it into a vision session about the lake area. I sat in the back, eating cold potato salad, listening as they talked about unified access, cohesive appearance, and removing outdated structures. That's when I knew this wasn't about community. It was a cleanup job. And they saw anything that didn't match their new plan. Old cabins, gravel roads, handmade docks as trash. My cabin, in their way. My bridge, inconvenient. Land, untapped opportunity. I didn't forget that night. Kept the pamphlet they passed out. It had a map, and on that map, my land was just blank. No name, no property lines, just space. So when they handed me a lawsuit, I wasn't surprised. I was ready, and I had something they did evidence. I hired a local attorney, not some big shot firm, just a guy named Frank, who'd been doing land law in our county for 40 years. He wore jeans to meetings and knew every back road by name. Frank took one look at the paperwork and said, "This is garbage." They had no easement, no signed agreements, no legal claim. They'd paved, installed, and enforced access on land they didn't own, and now they were suing the landowner. He shook his head, chuckling. "This'll get tossed in 5 minutes." But I didn't want it tossed. I wanted it heard. So we filed a countersuit. Property encroachment, unauthorized development, invasion of privacy, damages. And just like that, HOA's little game got real. We didn't even need to go to court yet once the news broke that they were being sued by the guy who owned the only bridge into the lake. Things started falling apart fast. HOA members started showing up at my cabin. Not the board, just regular folks. People who'd paid their dues and assumed everything was legal. One couple, Don and Eliza, came by with muffins and questions. They had no idea the HOA had built the fiber line through my land. They thought the gate was approved by the county. They were furious. I showed them the map, the deeds, everything. Don just kept shaking his head. We trusted them. And that's when I realized the board didn't just lie to me. They lied to their own people. Let me jump ahead a little. Preview 6 weeks later, the HOA president resigned. No press release, no meeting, just gone. But back to where we were. While the lawsuit brewed, I went back to the cabin like nothing happened. Fixed a screen door, chopped some firewood, read a book. But I was watching, and sure enough, they tried again. This time, a landscaping crew showed up. Said they were clearing brush along the new path, but they weren't supposed to be there, not on my side. I walked out with my phone, camera rolling. "Who hired you?" I asked. HOA, one guy said this area was approved. Pointed to the survey stakes, marked in bright red. "You're standing on private land." They packed up within 10 minutes. Left behind a leaf blower and a shovel. I emailed the footage to Frank. He laughed so hard, I thought he'd fall off his chair. But what made me angriest wasn't the trespassing. It was the arrogance. They didn't even think they needed to ask. They acted like the law was something that only applied to other people. 2 folks who didn't know better, but I knew better. I'd lived on that land for 26 years. I'd walked it in the snow. I'd pulled my kids in a sled across that bridge. Buried my dog in the pines behind the porch. You can't take that from someone with a letter and a lock. You can try, but some land bites back. You know what's funny? I didn't want to fight. Didn't want meetings or letters or courtrooms. All I wanted was peace. My little cabin, my quiet bridge, my place. They forced the fight. And now they had to live with what came next. Because when that lawsuit became public, guess what else came out? The HOA's budget Turns out a lot of members didn't know how much money had been spent paving roads, installing cameras, hiring crews. And definitely not that it had gone into land they didn't own. They started asking questions. A few even asked me to run for the board. I said no, of course. I wasn't interested in rules and meetings, but I wasn't done watching either. That bridge. It's more than concrete and bolts. It's a reminder that sometimes the quiet guy at the end of the road isn't so easy to push around. That sometimes he's the only one holding the key. You ever wonder what happens after the dust settles? After the fight? After the lawyers? After the power shifts? You think it's over? But sometimes the silence afterward. That's when you hear the truth loudest. 3 months passed. The lawsuit was still open, just sitting there in the county system, waiting for a date. But something had changed. People stopped talking about me like I was the villain, wasn't the angry guy at the cabin anymore. I was the one who stood up, the one who didn't fold. But the HOA? They were crumbling from the inside. I found out later the new treasurer, some retired accountant named Larry, went through the books and flagged over $120,000 in miscellaneous improvement costs. No records, no receipts. Just vague mentions of community beautification and access upgrades. All of it tied to projects on land they didn't even own. Mine. Let me back up a bit, just after the cease and desist mess. I got a handwritten letter from one of the board members. Not typed, not official. Just a note on lined paper. It read, "I didn't know. None of us did. They never showed us the maps. I'm sorry, Ellen." I kept that letter. Not because I needed an apology, I didn't. But because it was the first real sign someone in that system finally saw the truth. Ellen didn't stay on the board long. She quit a few weeks later. A few others followed. The ones who stayed, well, they started changing their tune. But here's the part nobody expected. They offered to settle. Their lawyer sent us a letter proposing a resolution. They'd remove all structures, retract the lawsuits, and pay a good faith compensation for use of the land. It wasn't enough. Not even close. But it was something my attorney Frank grinned when he read it. Guess the bridge finally made its point. I didn't say yes right away. I thought about it for a few days. I walked the land, stood on the bridge at sunset, and watched the water move slow under the beams. My dad and I poured ourselves. Then I called Frank and said, "Tell them I'll talk. But we meet on my land, at my cabin. No suits, no spin." So they came. 2 of them. The new interim board president, a guy named Kurt, who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, and a lawyer who barely said a word. We sat on the porch. I gave them coffee. No tension, no yelling. And I asked one question. Why? Kurt looked out toward the trees for a long time before answering. "We thought we were building something better," he said. "What?" "But we never asked who we were building." Over, I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. They agreed to everything. They pulled all construction, removed the fiber cable, rerouted the path, paid damages. And most important of all, they filed official easement corrections that remove my land from their jurisdiction. Completely. No HOA oversight. No access. Nothing. My land was mine again. But that's not where this ends, because word got out. Other property owners started checking their deeds, their easements, their rights. Turns out I wasn't the only one. They'd crossed. Maria got her dock grandfathered in permanently. James got reimbursed for 2 years of unfair fees. A dozen others filed complaints and backed out of HOA decisions entirely. It wasn't just about a bridge anymore. It was about people realizing they still had power. That the system isn't always right just because it sounds official. That you don't need to yell to stand firm. That sometimes all you need is proof, a backbone, and a little concrete poured in the right place. Let me take you back, so one last time, to the day we poured that bridge. My dad stood back after the last bucket of gravel was laid and said, "Now no one can say they let you in. You built your way through." I didn't understand what he meant then, but I do now. That bridge wasn't just a path to the cabin. It was a line in the dirt, a boundary that said, "This is mine. You don't cross it without asking." And now, that line's clearer than ever. The HOA changed. New board, new policies. They started knocking on doors before making decisions, started actually listening. They even hosted a community dinner last month. I didn't go not because I was bitter, but because I didn't need to. I had nothing left to prove. The land speaks for itself now. No cameras, no chains, no signs that say I need permission. Just the sound of wind in the trees, water under the bridge, and peace, real peace, earned the hard way. So if you ever find yourself staring down a system that doesn't care about the truth, remember this: you don't need to scream. You don't need to beg. You just need to know what's yours. Stand on it. Because sometimes the quietest people are the ones holding the ground everything else is built on. And sometimes they own the only bridge in.